So much silence. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Tech Summit 2026, and welcome to our university. It's a real pleasure to have you here. We have among the audience founders, engineers, researchers, executives, students, and innovators from across industries who are shaping both the present and the future. Events like this matter because of attention, I think, that has defined pretty much every great technological era. Breakthroughs built in one domain end up reshaping all the others. Electrification didn't just change factories, it transformed cities, medicine, culture. Computing didn't stay in research labs, it remade finance, communication, and warfare. What defines our moment is that this cross-pollination is no longer sequential. It is happening across dozens of domains simultaneously, and faster than institutions, including us universities, were designed to absorb. AI developed for logistics is transforming healthcare. Tools designed for defense are remaking mobility. Breakthroughs in material science are enabling the next generation of space systems. When change moves at this speed and across that many fronts at once, the most important conversation happen at the boundaries between disciplines, between industries, between people who would normally be in the same room. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here tonight. For those of us, or for those of you joining us for the first time, let me tell you who we are. Our university is a global university with campuses in Madrid, Segovia, New York, and Riyadh. We have students from over 160 nationalities and a wide variety of backgrounds and interests that are studying with us today. Students with a global mindset who challenge the status quo and who aim to generate a positive impact in the world. IU was founded on the belief that the best education doesn't just transfer knowledge, it builds the ability to create and transform. That's why entrepreneurship, innovation, and technology have always been at our core. Within that broader mission, our School of Science and Technology sits right at the center of that vision. The school was created with a clear ambition to rethink how STEM education should prepare talent for a world defined by constant technological change. That rethinking is urgent, we think. According to the latest global talent shortage survey from Manpower Group, 72%, let me emphasize this, 72% of employers worldwide report difficulty finding candidates with the right skills. But this is not only a recruitment problem, we think, it's also a design problem. And that is exactly why we believe higher education must evolve. We have the opportunity and the responsibility to redesign education in STEM around systems thinking, around interdisciplinarity collaboration, and real-world applications, around the skills that allow people not only to understand technology, but to apply meaningfully in complex environments. That philosophy is reflected in our programs, all built in close connection with industry and emerging global challenges. Because this connection with industry is fundamental to how we educate. Technology moves too fast for universities and companies to operate in parallel. The future belongs to institutions capable of building ecosystems where academia, research, the entrepreneurial community, and industry continuously learn from each other. That's why partnerships are such a core of what we are at IE. We collaborate with leading organizations across financial systems, health and medtech, clean tech and energy, robotics and AI, aerospace, mobility, and many other sectors through co-design programs, applied research, mentorship, hackathons, venture initiatives, talent pipelines. To those of you who already collaborate with us, I want to say thank you from the bottom of our hearts for being part of this journey that is so important to us. And to those who don't yet, consider tonight an open invitation. We would love to explore how we can work together to shape the next generation of technology, talent, and innovation. Now, let me briefly walk you through what's ahead for today. We'll open with space, and in a moment, I'll be delighted to have on stage someone that is at the core of what's happening in space right now. I'll have Raquel González Sola joining me. Then Professor Matteo Turilli will take the stage to explore supercomputing, AI, Gigafactories, and Europe's role in this technological chapter. After that, we'll have a panel on the future of space with Elena Grifoni, Inmaculada Serrano, and Verónica Regina, moderated by our Vice Provost Jaime de Aguinaga. And we'll close the formal program with a conversation between Sophia Neuendorf, Vice President of Artnet, and Catalina Tejero, Dean of our School of Humanities, on the intersection of art, technology, and the market. And let me tell you, we've made a deliberate choice to end here with this panel, because the real measure of any technological era is not what it builds, but what it expresses about us, our values, our imagination, our sense of what matters. That conversation belongs at the center of a tech summit, not at the margins, we believe. We are living through a moment of extraordinary technological acceleration. The question is not simply what technology can do. We are learning that answer every day. The harder question, I think, is what we choose to do with it, and who gets to be part of making that choice. Tonight, I hope you leave with at least one idea you didn't arrive with about space, about AI, about the role of humanities in shaping how we build. For tonight, I invite you to be curious, push on assumptions, and talk to someone you haven't met before. And with that, let's get started. I'm thrilled to welcome Raquel González Sola on stage. Raquel is the VP head of Airbus Space Systems Spain. She has spent over 20 years in the space sector, from engineering carbon structures and separation systems for the Ariane 5 launcher to leading the development of payloads for Earth observation missions like the Copernicus, Sentinel-3, and the METOP SG Ice Cloud Imager. Before Airbus, she worked at the French space agency, CNS. Since January 2025, she has led all of Airbus space programs business in Spain. So quite a space to fill, Raquel. And she's a passionate advocate for European space collaboration and sovereign ambition. Raquel, please join me on stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Raquel. It's such a pleasure. I'm going to try to cover as much as possible, but I don't want to lead the conversation, so hopefully we have some space afterwards for you to also ask anything that you might want to know further. But Raquel, I want to start. You've spent more than 2 decades in the space industry, from engineering carbon structures for the Ariane 5 launcher to leading Airbus space systems in Spain. What first you drew to space, and what keeps you here? And I know that you did your undergrad in that, so what was in that head when you were little that was pushing you to the space and to where you are today?
Yeah, no, thank you. First of all, thanks a lot for inviting me. It's really a pleasure, and also to see all the people that have an interest in tech and in space. So I'll do my best to answer your questions, and I hope to spark a bit also in case you have some doubts around space, and potentially to join us in some years. Personally, for me, the space was quite a natural step, because at home, as I was surrounded by space topics, merchandising, stories, and so on. And this because my father worked in the space sector for almost all his entire career.
Okay.
So that's why it was a bit, I mentioned natural. Although I need to admit that when I was a child, I thought it was impossible because it was so inspiring. But yes, I mean, little by little, I studied aeronautical engineer, and then eventually I could join this great space sector. And what keeps me there, as you were asking me, space is so great. When I joined 20 years ago the space sector, space was much more focused on at least answering the great questions we have around humanity, so more this scientific view. When you see today what is space for our societies, in particular in our developed countries, we could not live without the service we get from space. I don't know if you realize, but more and more, and on a daily basis, most of you connect with around more than 100 satellites in order to get access to navigation systems, to communications, imagery, and so on. So just to give some examples. So it's really something that has exploded, and it's even in an expansion way, also with the defense, security, and so on. So there is so much to do. So an inspiring sector, and it has grown. And at this point, it's also in this situation, this blooming situation, so to serve our societies and to even expand what space can bring.
Actually, I wanted to ask you, because we keep hearing, and we were saying, like, space is so much in fashion nowadays. We keep hearing about that, and we keep hearing that we are in this new era of space. You touched a little bit on that, but if you can elaborate more, I mean, when was the defining moment when we put space on the stage, and maybe it has to do with geopolitical issues, but it goes beyond that. It goes on the applications on our day-to-day from all the research that we're doing in space. So can you pinpoint a defining moment where, like, suddenly you become so much in fashion?
I don't think there is a tipping point, because all the infrastructure which is in connection to space is not built in one day. The Galileo system, which is one of benchmark system in the world in terms of navigation, it has been developed in Europe. It has taken more than 20 years from the start of the political idea around pushing this navigation system in Europe till it went into an operational status. So it takes a number of years. What we have seen in the past decades, it's an acceleration, and this brought by a number of disruptions. One of them is what the new space, and in particular SpaceX, started. So this brought a lot of disruption, a lot of acceleration. It's just one example. But all this infrastructure and how all this has been integrated in our daily lives, it's really the result of a lot of years of work, and yes, eventually now reaching this situation, and what still needs to be built.
And as a European company, I have to ask you this: can Europe realistically compete at the same scale and speed as the US and China? How do you see us?
Good question. No, first of all, I think we need to recognize that Europe is already a space power. We should, this you really need to know. I was mentioning Galileo. Galileo is the best navigation system we have worldwide. So this is why space is already part of our a big asset that we have in Europe. We have as well Copernicus. And Copernicus is as well a big number of satellite and infrastructure that are capturing a number are observing the Earth on a number of parameters, and this is bringing an enormous amount of data, which is as well helping a lot for the sustainability on Earth. It's capturing data around the humidity on Earth, and then you can optimize on the agriculture part. It's one example. Again, so space is already a big power. On the launcher side, just as well to touch on this part, so some years ago, Ariane 4, the family of launchers we had, and at that point Ariane 4 was leading the market of the launchers worldwide. So with a much less amount of budget, because you need to know that in Europe the budgets, when we take all the budgets from all the countries and you combine everything, we have much less budget than what we have in the US. It's 5 to 7 times less than what we have in the US. And even with this much smaller number of budget, we have been able, and we are able to do such amazing systems as the one I'm mentioning. So for sure we are, I think, quite established there. Now we are losing competitiveness. And for sure the Draghi report, Letta report, were very, I think, clear on that, in that respect. And with the geopolitical context, we need to wake up as European, and this is totally valid for space. We cannot continue as we have been doing so far, and we need to take further steps. We are too fragmented. We are too fragmented in the various missions and in the way Europe is contracted, on the budget, on the too bureaucratic in the decision making. From the industry, I believe we are as well, we are too fragmented. So we need to wake up, and in order to continue in this race, to do a number of changes to remain in this ambitious path.
And actually, that leads me to my next question. How important it is independent European access to space today? Maybe not just economically, but also geopolitically. I mean, why? Yeah. Do we need to fill that space and be strong in that space?
The European independence access to space, this is linked to the launcher part. In the transition between Ariane 5 and Ariane 6, there was a moment in which European was not having an independent access to space. So imagine, I was mentioning before in a very brief manner, the relation between space and defense. When you have some assets that are key, because military satellites or other critical satellites that need to be positioned in orbit, and then you depend on third countries, then okay, you are completely tight. So it's super important to get this autonomous access. You have probably heard that there are a number of constellations and satellites which are today in prospect, and those need to be launched afterwards. So we need to have these strong launch possibilities in Europe. We have a lot of work to do. We have not yet, we need to push further for reusability. Ariane 6, which is now successfully in place, and last year all the launches, there were 4 launches done, they were super successful, but it's not a reusable launcher, so we need to push in that field to lower the cost of the launch. And so there is work to be done, and Europe is so far, and there are a number of companies which are also developing other launchers in Europe to keep in that race that I was mentioning.
And if I take you, like I put the lens and I take you even like closer home, what do you think is the unique role that Spain can play within this European space ecosystem? Are we underestimating what Spanish aerospace industry is capable of, or not?
I personally think that the Spanish space ecosystem we have right now, from an industry perspective, it's a very powerful one. We have a mix of, I would say, traditional companies like the one in which I am, Airbus. This year we are celebrating 60 years being in space. We are the oldest space firm in Spain, but like us, you have others, GMV, Sener, that have been there also for a quite period of time, and it means that they have captured in all this time quite a number of technologies, know-how, expertise, which is super valid, and we have reached some core elements. For instance, last year we launched SpainSat NG. SpainSat NG is a satellite telecommunication satellite, and it has currently the worldwide most powerful active antenna. And those have been developed in Spain by the Spanish industry, led by us, but I mean also with a big contribution. And just to show to you, there are really core elements which are there. And together with this traditional mix of companies, we have also seen the appearance and the creation of new companies, more new space, which are also super powerful and are taking as well, and are bringing as well a very complementary capabilities and view and also agility to this more traditional way of doing space. So I think a great, a very powerful pillar, but now it needs to be seen at least at European level, because I don't think it makes sense, and in order to put all the systems that we need for space, it cannot be done by one unique country in Europe. So we really need the contribution at European level, and it's the same for industry. So for Spain, we should not aim to have each and to cover each and every part of the technology that need to be developed, but more to focus on some key elements that we can master and further expand on them, but together in the ecosystem that we can have in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Let me go a little bit off topic, but we'll come back, because you mentioned all the companies that are being created. Are you seeing the entrepreneurial ecosystem actually growing in this space?
In Spain, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, this the interest for space in Spain and in other countries in Europe has really accelerated and bring a number of companies that were not there. I have been working in Airbus for since 1999. Now I start to not to count the years, but for a number of years, for 5 years, I was not in space. So I left in 2019, a bit before, and then I came back last year. And in these 6 years, I have seen a tremendous change. All these new companies were really starting, but we were not seeing really them. And in these 5-6 years, they have really developed.
Picked up.
Yes.
And what is Airbus' relationship with them?
Airbus, I mean, super good. I mean, super good. And I was mentioning the example of the active antenna of SpainSat NG. Airbus, and that's not only for space. We really collaborate. We work in collaboration. We often have the mission to lead or to have this system level role, and so to take the overall leadership, to be the prime, to be the integrator. But then we count on very powerful suppliers, subsystems, which are part of this team, and together we build a satellite, a given part. So our mission to really elevate all the Spanish ecosystem remains very much at the core of what we do. It has been the case along the 60 years, and it remains. And we are very proud because we have seen all the evolution. And I give you another example. We developed a radar Earth observation satellite that is called PATH. PATH was launched in 2018 and is providing imagery for mainly focus on defense. It's radar, so it means it's 24/7 available to provide images. And this satellite, which is functioning in a very good and very reliable manner, at that point we're having around 40% of participation of the Spanish industry. We were leading it from Spain, but we managed to bring to this 40%. Last year we started the next generation of this radar, Path 2. We signed it in July. Now for Path 2, we have increased this participation in Spain up to more than 65%, 65%, and also doing the core elements of the radar. So it's not doing, I would say,
the accessories.
Small things or things which are less critical. It's really at the heart and at the core part of the radar satellite. So that's a great program we are currently developing, and for which we need talented people, by the way.
That's why I was asking you, because I'm sure we have entrepreneurs here, or someone
yes.
thinking to launch.
Yes.
I actually wanted to ask you about this technology that you mentioned, the Earth observation satellites, and how do you think they're changing the way governments and companies make decisions, if at all? I mean, and I'm very curious about whether I can see governments, but companies. I mean, do you see how they're maybe like changing decisions or making decisions based on that?
Yes, I mean it's. I'll give you this is very much used, for instance, by insurance companies. Insurance company, with the imagery you can get through satellites, you have a very detailed view on a given moment. So when, for instance, there is a catastrophe or there is something happening, I don't know, in the volcano of La Palma or even La Dana, and at that point the images from path were very much used, first to prevent and to help in the terrible moments of the catastrophic event, but afterwards insurance companies, this is one example, uses images very much to see how has been the evolution and the coverage they could eventually take or not.
Okay.
So that's one example. So yes, for sure it's super valid.
Okay, and I mean, we were talking about artificial intelligence, so I have to ask you about artificial intelligence and how that's transforming your space.
We are integrating artificial intelligence already in our satellites, so that's also something for you to know that it's a reality. Now I believe we needed to do it much stronger. The other, I would say, difficulty, or at least the fact that we are not able to accelerate is as well very much connected to our defense environment. We often work in programs which needs to have a very high security, and this with respect to AI need to be managed. So this is, I think, one of the elements for which we have been a bit low in what I consider, but we need to give it another push, and it's for the onboarding, so AI on board of our satellites, so that we can better, for instance, filter the data we download, and instead of downloading, because this is a big part, all the data rate we need to secure, to download all the depending on the mission, the data that is captured, then you could eventually filter on board and optimize much more what you bring down on Earth. But also in our industrial plants, with the appearance of constellations. In the past, we were more used in space to do a one-off satellite, and now we are producing, and we aim to produce hundreds. And this, you need for that much more industrialization, much more taking much more data, and on this, the AI, we are as well pushing very much on that part as well, on our industrial shop floors.
Okay, and if we go to the future, what technology today still feels like science fiction that is going to become mainstream, you think, in the next 10 years, 5 years? I don't know, because this goes so fast.
Yeah, it's quite difficult to take one, because there are so many which in parallel are progressing, and for sure I think that you all saw the Artemis 2 mission and what was achieved there, and the next steps in order to have a permanent settlement in the moon. So there are a lot of challenges in accordance to dance, in accordance to bringing humans to not to the moon, because this we know that it's already achieved, but to bring them in a permanent manner, and then eventually to have another step to go to other planets. But I would take one technology which is very promising right now, and it's quantum. The quantum technology, and it's not only for space, but in space and in the application for space, it has a lot of prospects. So for secure communication on the quantum key, on the QKD, the technology behind. Also quantum sensors for some applications, also for different types of sensors. So there is a lot which is right now on that field, which is at stake.
Okay, and just for the last part, I want us to move a little bit on the leadership and talent space, because you're leading and you you lead very highly complex environments and systems, and I believe where the margin of error is pretty much zero. So what does leadership look like in your environment?
The first comment I would make is with respect to what you have mentioned of no room for failure. We need to keep space to fail, but then fail fast and learn from it. And that's something that probably in the US it is very much more present, this permission to fail. and in Europe we have another way of approaching, being much more rigorous on the early phases and produce a lot of analysis before entering into a testing phase. And this is something which is changing, but still we need to push further in that field so that we don't see a fail like something which is bad, but something which is needed. You need to learn, and on that basis, to the next step. But then leadership, it's I would say in any other industry. So I would not think you need something for sure. You need to be bold. This is a very risky sector in the sense of what you need to take or to decide. So you need to be courageous to go because you will have some risk to cover, and on specific business cases it's quite difficult. But I don't think that in other industries it's also not easy in that respect. So I would say same elements of leadership, knowing for sure that you will have this environment or this type of programs which are long-term, very risky investments, and it needs to be to require quite some courage to go at one point. Yes.
But along these lines, and I know that obviously when you work in a company, you can't make your own decisions because so many other people depend on you, and especially in the industry that you're working in. But in this idea of we need to be more like the US, allowing people to fail and learn fast and then move on, and this idea of being to have courage, I think they go hand in hand, right? Like people have courage when they believe that they can fail. So how do you manage, thinking in your team, is there anything that you try to do a little bit different to encourage people to be courageous and make decisions and fail fast, or is there space for that in your?
Right now we are, at least in Airbus, in space systems, we are probably at a different stage because of our current situation, and the stage in which we are, it's more to focus and to execute on quality, on time, on cost. So really on the basics. For sure for that you need creativity and you need space to fail, because we need to be much more efficient in what we do, and on that one we have room for improvement.
Okay. Well, fair enough.
No, yes, but it's
focusing on what's needed at some point.
Right now it's really focused because, and that's also one of the problems I was mentioning of Europe. We tend to be too dispersed, so we are really focused on the to choose somehow our battles, and this is what we are choosing our battles, and then we have an enormous amount of work. So I was mentioning the current path too, but today our workload is really huge, but now we need to execute and to deliver on quality, on time, on cost.
Okay. There are some students among our audience, so I wanted to ask you, what do you think are the skills that these young people should develop if they wanted to work in the future space economy?
In space, okay. we need a lot of very multidisciplinary skills. For sure, we are technical. We have very technical focus. So all the skills around STEM, you were mentioning before, STEM careers are very much at the core of our employees. So studying or coming from engineering degrees, masters, and so on. We're talking before what engineering, all types of engineers are welcome. For sure, aerospace it's a very good one. No, but jokes apart, I mean the engineering and the STEM background, I think it's something which is very much needed. All the digital focus and skills are as well a must today. But then not only, we need people, marketing, communication, legal, all these are needed in a similar amount. Not amount in terms of employees, but they're as well needed so that in the end, all that we need to perform, we manage to do it.
Okay. My last question, if we were to be sitting here again in 2035, and some of these students will already be CEOs of like really cool aerospace companies, what breakthrough would you like us to be celebrating in space?
2035 is not that far from
maybe
now.
Maybe we are doing it in the moon.
It's not that far, but yes, I would really love that we see a man in Mars. I think in the moon it will be already achieved
very
much
soon.
before. I hope that we have proven at that stage that we are capable to sustain life in the moon and to have sustainable and this permanent base. But then we know we need to go to the next step from a humankind. And I think there will be this, what I was mentioning before, also on Earth, and the services that we'll get from Earth will continue to expand. And this is something that we'll see also much more. All that we can have from space will for sure expand.
I think if I can grasp a couple of things, I get the message of we're really good. Now we need to get our art together. We need to collaborate, focus, and deliver and execute. Right? Thank you so much, Raquel. And I don't know, Maria, if we have time to do questions. Yes? Okay, the boss is back there, so she tells me. So we have time for maybe a couple of questions, if anyone in the audience has any question or comment. Yeah, we have there. There is a microphone, yeah.
Thank you. Hi, nice to meet you. I have a question. So Airbus is developing a quantum computer program?
Sorry?
A
Can
quantum computer program.
Advanced computing program.
A quantum computer program. Airbus is developing a program of this? No?
We can't hear you well, so...
Advanced computing program
so
for what?
It's my understanding that Airbus is developing a quantum computer program.
Quantum.
Sorry, we can't hear well.
Quantum, yeah. As I was mentioning, quantum technology is very much on the various roadmaps for technology development. When it comes to space, and I was mentioning, for instance, quantum sensors, we are pushing on that field. Right now, I don't know if you know, the technological readiness level, the TRL, the so-called TRL, is at a very low one, and we need to improve. But yes, we have.
Very interesting.
Yes.
I believe quantum computer is going to be like the next industrial revolution.
Yes.
Anyone else?
Thank you. Any other question? Yeah, we have one question here.
So from your discussion, I can understand very well that the history of space exploration is very tied to military application. And now I was just thinking, But we also know that, of course, space exploration is very much international effort, ISS and everything like that. However, with the recent development we see where geopolitical agendas take overhand, you know, US, one example, I wanted to ask you, do you feel a certain worry? Do you have a certain worry in your mind that, you know, if geopolitical agendas take overhand, what impact, negative impact it might have on, you know, space exploration?
Space exploration, yeah. We see already the consequence. All these geopolitical tensions, we see already the consequences for space, because as you have rightly said, space, and that's also the beauty of space, and for me it's very attractive because it's super international. And I have more put the focus on Europe, but we do a number of programs in international collaboration. The ISS is one of them. So I think it's a great as well sector to join humanity and to remove barriers. And for sure, what's happening today in the geopolitical arena has put some barriers. For sure with Russia, but then not only. So I hope we'll be able to recover the spirit in some years, but so far this for sure has been cut. When we think on the future of the ISS, today there is a question mark on how to move on. I mean, you know, and you have heard Trump, how he has also, when he arrived, he cut the budget, and one of the fields that have been very much impacted is science, but exploration as well. Now there is this comeback with the moon and so on, but on the ISS, there is, in terms of budgeting, there is question mark. So I hope we can recover. Last week, yes, we launched a very nice mission, which is called SMILE, and it was the first one that European Space Agency and China, with the Chinese Academy of Science, were collaborating together and doing a mission 50-50 on science to better understand how the magnetic field of the Earth protect us from the solar wind, and to better predict the big storms from the solar particles that reach the Earth, and then avoid disruptions and so on. And that's a joint collaboration with China. If we were to start this type of missions today, I don't know, maybe it would not be done, and that's a pity. So I hope we can recover. But for sure, so far, space is as well a military domain, as it has been defined and probably some years ago by NATO. And so it means that as well, this is part of our defense. And that's why this geopolitical situation is also showing that there is the space arena is as well very much on that field of securing our defense, protecting the satellites that we have up there, and then this is also a field that will very much evolve in the next years. On the number of satellites that will be focused on defense, on how to protect those assets. This is very much as well at stake.
I think sorry, but we will have time afterwards because we need to continue going. Thank you so much, and thank you, Raquel. It's been a pleasure and a really interesting conversation, and want to keep going for a very long time. Very inspiring. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for the kind invitation. I'm Matteo Turilli. I'm a professor here at IE. I teach Foundation of Artificial Intelligence, and I'm an expert in my research is specific to high-performance computing, that usually is called HPC, and distributed systems. So I study specifically the convergence of this area of research that has a certain history with machine learning. So that's what we focus on today. Clicking, no, clicking, no, yes. Okay, so probably you all know in some way or form, because it's been a hype for a while now, right? That artificial intelligence and specifically machine learning is conquering more and more spaces in our life. And the fact is that sometimes we don't even realize we use it, but basically it's by now is everywhere. So every technological instruments we use usually starts to have a certain amount of artificial intelligence embedded into it. We heard also in the previous talk the importance that is starting to have. And so it's really hype. Well, you know, around 2024, we started to understand there was a little bit more than that. For sure, there is a lot of hype, right? But we got 2 Nobel Prizes specifically about the foundation and the scientific foundation of machine learning. We got 200 million proteins sequenced thanks to AlphaFold, that is an AI-enabled tool for protein sequencing. And just to give you an idea, we sequenced 200 million of them, and in the past 50 years, we sequenced 200,000. Okay, so this starts to give you an idea of the acceleration that machine learning can give in many sectors of society and research, obviously. 900 million ChatGPT users, probably a lot of us here in this room too. The important bit is the trend. We got 900 million in 3 years of existence, 100 million in the first year, okay? So in the first 2 years. So you see that is basically going up. As I said, is everywhere, okay? So we will see more and more images. The machine learning at scale works on data centers that have rows and rows and rows, thousands of rows of those computers inside each cabinet. Each cabinet is around a ton of weight. Is super dense of computers, okay? So this is the scale we are speaking about. Google Maps, if you came here as I did, I got lost, and traffic, and that tells us where the traffic is, machine learning. Most likely, most of the latest drugs that the doctors prescribe to you, machine learning discovered, okay? So it's truly, really everywhere. So, no, will work, okay. So how did we get here? Okay, so it's not just a out of blue sudden breakthrough that brought us here. Okay, so it's the convergence of many different things. First and foremost is big data. That's the original enabler. Once that we started from the 90s into the 2000s and now to an unprecedented level to digitize all data, that has created data sets and quality of data sets that were not existent before. So while a lot of the science that we used to do machine learning is from the 60s, we didn't have this kind of data. So we couldn't imagine the way to use machine learning before having those data, okay? The other thing is that we started to add GPUs, so graphic processing units, usually used for gamers, right? And then at a certain point, NVIDIA had this genius idea that it could be actually programmable processors. Created CUDA, created a library that made possible the general purpose programming of these processors, basically multiplication of matrices at super high speed. And so that accelerated what we could do with machine learning, okay? And then we started to have, both from academia, but in a growing rate from industry, progress in deep learning. So now they put together CPU and big data that started to have a deep learning. Before we had only learning. We got a breakthrough from a company, a transformer. This is an architecture that is basically architecture behind the ChatGPT, okay? Then we add we sprinkle a little bit of other research, always mostly from the private sector, and we arrive at ChatGPT. So that's a history in a nutshell, in 2 minutes. exactly how we arrived there, okay? So let's give a quantitative understanding of these trends, right? Important at the top left. That is the capital invested, the private, the corporate capital invested in AI. You can see that the inflection point is 2022. And you can see that 2025 literally shoots up, okay? We have more than $500 billion invested exclusively from the private sector. So this starts to look like something that is structural, okay? Now, on the left, you can start to see that we have a separation. We have a dominance, an absolute dominance of the United States in this context list, both in terms of quantity, capital little invested from private companies, but also, obviously, the number of new companies that are open. Okay, so extremely dynamic, extremely committed, maybe extremely hyped, right? But that's what this data is telling us. And obviously, well, not that obviously, but interestingly, at least, we do have a correlation with adoption. And this is expected, okay? So once that machine learning and especially deep learning and especially the transformers have been industrialized and productified, we started to have chatbots that are general purpose, multimodal, they can do images, they can do language, they can do maybe video soon. And we started to use them for whatever reason. Right? That's the inflection point, that's the moment in which we start to use them. And as we use them at home, when we don't know something, we use them at work, okay? Now, at this moment in time, most of the investment is on the physical support, is on the data centers. So you might have heard there is a lot of discussion also in the public discussion, right, in the public domain about all these data centers that are growing, that are being built. And the reason is basically that we need an enormous amount of computation. While, yes, we have GPUs, we have accelerators, we have even TPUs, stuff that are specific for deep learning, but we still need a monstrous amount of computation. So technically speaking, as an engineer, we say that we transition to a state in which we are compute bound. We know how to do things, we just don't have enough instruments to do it, okay? So it's not a theoretical problem anymore, it's a problem of scale. How big can we go? And you see that most of the investment, so this we are speaking about $450 billion, are invested in these infrastructures, okay? Now, obviously, the cost of using and building these tools and using these tools is ramping up. You can see the two major players at the moment, American, obviously, and you can see that the investment for training new models and using new models, so using them for inference, is growing exponentially, okay? So that's the landscape, and now I want you to focus on the bottom right, okay? So this is a planned data center, but this data center is 30,000 football fields, okay? Take a second to try to depict in your mind what that means, okay? So this is in Utah, a place where there is absolutely nothing in the middle of Utah, and 30,000 football fields, okay? So this thing, okay, will consume 9 gigawatt an hour. This is a big city there. So that's the scale at which we are moving in the private sector, okay? Let it sink a little bit. We are speaking about terabytes of electricity burn an hour, okay? Like, a year. So you can imagine the amount of heat that this thing produces, okay? So that's what is happening in the private sector. And obviously, we needed to start to look at this as something that is becoming structural. So historically, think about electricity, before, after electricity, okay? And when we say structural, we mean exactly the role that electricity started to play into society. These days, we know here, we had the big apagón, right? Here we had the big blackout here in Spain. It lasted only 12 hours, but it was monstrous. Suddenly you realize that you don't have food, you don't have phones, you don't have money, you cannot pay the beer at the terrace, right? You lost everything that you froze, you basically can do nothing. Some people cannot get out of their house, right? If you have the magic idea to use an electronic lock. So that's what we are thinking here. Is AI in general, machine learning, is it going to become this level of structure? Will we be able to work without it? Will our satellites will work without it? Like, you see that we are starting to think in those terms. Okay. Now, historically, this calls from sovereignty. This means that basically becomes so important, imagine electricity, so dangerous, imagine nuclear energy applied to the military field, so fundamental to be defined a human right, the internet, right? So that's the level at which we are thinking about. And historically, sovereignty becomes necessary because we cannot allow the interest of a specific company that or small amount of companies that need to do rightfully so, the interest of their shareholders, right? To determine, to control how something so structural works, right? And so this is what is happening, what happened historically. But now let's look at AI, because there are some interesting peculiarities of AI compared to the other example that I gave, okay? So AI is probably one of the first historical events in which we have an end-to-end vertical solution. So we have, these are 11 companies that account for 99% of everything we've been speaking about, 11 companies. Most of them are in the United States, as you know. And what we are really seeing at the end-to-end is that we go from the silicon, so literally TSMC, so the production of the silicon that is commissioned by NVIDIA, right? The ownership of the silicon, this is NVIDIA. The hyperscale data centers, this enormous industrial artifacts that we described before, right? To the models themselves. ChatGPT is owned by someone, Cloud is owned by the company, right? So these are closed proprietary models. And the deployment. In order to use those models, we need to go through the interfaces that this company exposed to us, okay? So we started to interrogate ourselves, and maybe it will not be, maybe it's an hype, but considering the example I gave you, it's very likely that it will be. We are, for probably the first time, we are having something that is structural to society, and it's vertically integrated exclusively in the private sector, or mostly, 99%, right? So this is something new, okay? So governance mechanisms remain immature in this context because who has the control, right? Who has the power, who has the balance, the check and balances to apply governance? And there is no sovereign public computer layer at frontier scale. Frontier scale means the big models, the enormous models, GPU, ChatGPT, Cloud, Gemini, all those ones, okay? So this is something new. So, what we do? Like, we needed to consider, in this context, we needed to consider sovereignty. So let's look at two projects that have been launched in 2025. One is in Europe, and it's called AI Gigafactories. And the other one is in the United States, and it's called Genesis, okay? Now, both of them have similarities. They are not the same, definitely. So one is top-down, Genesis. The other one is bottom-up, that is AI Gigafactories. But the underlying intent in the context of what we are speaking about here is the same. Is the government, basically, the state-level actors, to start to say we need to have a form of sovereignty on this type of technology, okay? Why? Because it has implication in everything we do. So we spoke about, in the previous talk, we spoke about the relevance, the strategic relevance of the satellites. Strategic relevance of this is obvious and evident everywhere, right? Think about the impact it has on drones, or think about the impact it has on everything. Okay, and then there are societal impacts. Then there are agendas, research agendas that are state-level research agendas, European-level research agendas. All this needs a degree of sovereignty. That means a degree of control of the public over these technologies that at the moment are completely vertically integrated into the private sector, okay, mostly. So let's see a little bit of numbers for these projects. 5 gigafactories, these are 100,000 GPUs each, so this entry into the hyperscale, this very, very, very big data centers. Now, consider that the total capacity projected by Microsoft across its data center is 1.5 million, okay, or 5 million, sorry, 5.2 million, okay? So start to have a little bit of parallel in terms of size between the private, where is the private going now, and where we are with the sovereignty initiatives, okay? 76 expression of interest in 60 sites, 16 member states, 230 billion investment, so this gives you a comparison. It's slightly less than average of the investment that has been done in 2025, but this is much more long term, okay? So this is not for a year. It's not 230 billion a year. Council regulation, and we have 19, most of them existing, AI factories across 17 countries. This means basically that we have already an infrastructure. And this is fundamental to understand how we are thinking about the sovereignty at the moment in which the private sector is overwhelming, okay? Now, if we look at Genesis mission, we will see some parallels, okay? Like we see 293 million, that is the pilot this year, but the estimate allocation is 500 billion actually, so it's twice as much the AI Gigafactory. The very similar approach. The only difference is that it's led directly by the Department of Energy, but that's traditional because all the supercomputing in the United States is managed by DOE. And we see that we have basically big machines that are built, and surprise, surprise, the big machines have 100,000 GPUs. Okay, so from a technical point of view, exactly the same thing. Europe is building 5, they are building 3. And they have already an enormous amount of high-performance computing available in the United States. We have a 19, okay? So we see the parallels here. Now, what is very different compared to the picture that I showed for the private sector? The difference is that we are leveraging a structure, literally a network of big computers that we have been having since the end of the Second World War, okay? And these computers, this infrastructure is called high-performance computing. We use it for CERN, we use it for the accelerator, the big accelerator, right? We use it for particle physics in the accelerator, we use it for any type of physics, and we use it for all the sectors in which HPC so far has been used, so mostly research and then industry, okay? For example, you like MotoGP, that now uses aerodynamics overwhelmingly. Where the simulations are run of aerodynamics, HPC. You like more Formula 1, HPC. You like sailing, HPC. You like flying, HPC. Okay, so everything that is related to a simulation of a physical system, HPC. Okay, so this has been true for 50 to 60 years. And now we need to understand how AI is changing this. It's changing at structural level. We need new plants that have an overwhelming amount of GPUs, but there are other changes that are coming, okay? Now, Spain is playing a fundamental role here. It has a very long tradition of high-performance computing, led by the Barcelona Supercomputing Center, but we have RES, that is a network of supercomputers here in Spain, and we are playing a role in the AI Gigafactory, because there are several tenders, and actually lately we have an Iberic tender. So Portugal and Spain came together, and interesting enough, we have a pre-data center that is literally 20 minutes north from actually there, and then we will have a final Gigafactory in Mora la Nova in Tarragona. Okay, also a question of cost, obviously. So Spain is playing its part, so as much as all other European participants. So you see this tension towards sovereignty and this reliance on the HPC infrastructure. So what are we going to do with these Gigafactory things, right? So the first impulse will be, oh, Europe will have its frontier model. Right, so we will have another Google, we will have another OpenAI, apologies, or we will have Anthropic. That's not going to happen, and the reason is in all the numbers I gave you, the disproportionate amount of investments we have in the private sector that dwarf everything we can do here. Okay, it's not a question they are better or worse. It's just money. Okay, and infrastructure and ecosystem. And culture of entrepreneurship, right? So that's the picture in which we are. We are going to do foundational models with the Gigafactory, 100,000 GPUs, more than enough, right? But we are not going to create the substrate that has led to the first wave of industrialization of AI, okay? But as defined by the European community, strategic sectors, the strategic sectors, as you see, cover all our life. Okay, so health, obviously, clean energy, advanced manufacturing, legal system, all the public administration, the microelectronics, and the climate. Basically, all the spectrum. So what is the trick here? Is beyond the researchers that will use these resources to do foundational models, or frontier models as they are called, most of the people who benefit from a Gigafactory will never train a model, will use the models. That's what we are doing. We are building capacity to enable use of these models, okay? Again, think about electricity. We are building the capacity to get electricity when you need it. And this means new entrepreneurial initiatives, right? It means public administration for efficiency. It means health that is regulated by the public interest and stuff like that, okay? So it's very important. Now, there are some specific challenges that come with AI. So we have challenges related normally to build such a titanic enterprise, right? So we are most likely facing an infrastructural revolution. So a new infrastructure is becoming necessary in our lives. And so we have challenges that are common to all this. We need to build it. We need to organize the ecosystem around it. We need to make it functional. Maybe we need to make it fair to a certain extent, or at least we need to make it regulated in a way that, for example, doesn't explode in our hands. Think about the nuclear weapons. How this will happen? We don't know. We have many different models, right? We have, maybe we will have an international super partes institution that regulates AI exactly as we do with nuclear weapons and nuclear energy in general, right? Maybe we will have that. Maybe we will have European level regulation, right? We don't know, but we know that will happen. It needs to happen, right? But then there are some specific challenges that are really specific to machine learning. And this is scale. We saw already the difference. But we know also that we are at the very beginning. We are getting more and more efficient. For example, China, after the embargo of the GPUs, because NVIDIA cannot sell the top performing GPUs in China, came up with an algorithmic solution. They just did it better, right? And they cost a fraction of what ChatGPT cost. So this shows us that there is space for still a fair big space for breakthroughs, technologically breakthroughs, okay? So scale, let's see, obviously is a disparity, what we can do, the amount of token we can have, the amount of models we can run, but there is hope there, right? Now, silicon is a little bit more structural. Like we do have a semiconductor producer in Europe, but none of them produces GPUs or AI-specific GPUs. And this is not simple to do. Requires an enormous amount of investment, enormous amount of time and know-how, intellectual property to do that properly, right? Imagine AMD is not able to compete with NVIDIA, okay, just to give you an idea. Intel is not able to compete with NVIDIA, right? But then you need also a software ecosystem. The reason because NVIDIA is the de facto leader in GPUs is not because it's the only one that does the GPUs that are able to run machine learning, it's because there is an entire programming ecosystem on it, right? And then energy, and that's my mistake. It should be energy and environment. Okay, we are consuming enormous amount of energy. We are speaking about hundreds of terawatts across all of Europe every year. Where do we find that energy? Where do we build it? How do we manage the impact on the environment, the monstrous impact on the environment, right? So these are structural challenges that we really don't know yet how to tackle. There is still a talent wave towards the United States. It's the biggest market, is where you can really realize all of your ideas to a certain level if you want to work on this. So we needed to counterbalance that. And then the ecosystem. The ecosystem is fundamental. We needed to create this ecosystem at educational level. That's why we have our own cluster here with our own GPUs. We need to change the way in which we educate in order to create talents, to create ecosystems, so that this talent goes out, has entrepreneurial ideas, starts companies, join bigger companies, contributes to the bigger companies of the sovereign environment, right? So that's really a set of challenges that are emerging, right? So one thing that is important to say is that we are not speaking about autarky, okay? Like a simplistic view of sovereignty is to say, oh, we create our own Silicon Valley. That doesn't work, right? It took a century to develop. That's not how this should be seen. As we saw the difference in the scale of investment from the private sector. We saw the difference in the scale of the instruments or the data centers. That's not how it works. What we need to think about is strategic integration. Okay, that's what it means sovereignty. What it means is full stack AI self-sufficiency is unrealistic. That's we understand. Hopefully my short presentation started to convince you. And strategic adventure will come from specialization. And this is very consistent with the HPC tradition. While we went through a moment in which HPC was a relatively general purpose, historically we have been doing HPC specialized for specific domains, and this is exactly the same. We need to specialize, we need to choose strategically where to impact with the investment that we have. This is sovereignty, okay? And thank you, I hope it was interesting.
So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jaime Daguinaga. I'm the Vice Provost here at IE, and I manage strategy, coordination, and institutional affairs. Please, so I should start with a confession. That is, I have the luxury of having a very nice job, but sometimes part of my job includes some not so exciting things. Part of my job is a bit boring. But there are some things that are very exciting. Now, one of the things that is very exciting is that I also facilitate a bit the exploration of new emerging strategic areas that could become part of our academic portfolio, right? And it just happened that space was also selected as one of those potential areas of expansion, right? And when I think about space, I cannot stop smiling. I mean, it's one of those things that just make me think about all the things that we can do, right? And when I see your faces, I see also people like that, right? So hopefully this conversation is going to be feeding up also that feeling now that there are so many things that we have to learn from the space and so many things that we can do, right? And the limits of this sector are just untouchable, right? So now we are going to talk about the future of space, right? And the idea is to build on the things that Raquel mentioned in the first intervention, right? But also to focus on how the different areas, no, how the different cultures are interacting in this expansion of the sector, right? And the idea is not to have a very technically deep discussion, no, about details, but more like a strategic forward-looking conversation, no, to see how this area is taking shape, right? So I will invite to the three ladies that are going to be part of this panel. So please, if you can sit down. So maybe, yeah. Perfect. So I will start with a very, very brief introduction of each of you. Right, so, and I'm going to read because, I mean, you will see that these three ladies are just amazing. So here on my left, we have Verónica La Regina. She's an international expert in space, business, commercialization, and policy with more than 20 years of experience across public institutions, industry, startups, and academia. She currently serves as a space mentor and professor at the International Innovation Institute in Hangzhou, China, and also teaches at the International Space University in France. Her career has included senior roles at organizations such as NanoRacks Europe, the European Space Agency, the Saudi Space Agency, the Italian Space Agency, and Space Cargo Unlimited, with a strong focus on innovation, entrepreneurship, and international collaboration. She has also advised governments and emerging venture worldwide, including supporting the establishment of Colombia's National Space Agency. Then on her left, we have Elena Grifoni. She's a senior aerospace executive and internationally recognized expert in space policy and governance with almost 40 years of experience in the sector, spanning from the European Space Agency, NASA, the Italian government, and the aerospace industry. She currently serves as professor of practice and academic director here at IE for the space education track that we are inaugurating these days. She's also a member of the board of directors of Leonardo, that probably many of you know. That is one of the European leading aerospace and defense companies. Previously, she held several senior leadership roles at the European Space Agency, including head of cabinet to the Director General of the ESA, and also secretary of the ESA Council, and worked closely with NASA on the International Space Station program. Her work today focuses on the future of space governance, international cooperations, and the strategic implications of emerging technologies. And finally, on the left position, we have Inmaculada Serrano, who is a senior executive and entrepreneur with more than 30 years of experience leading technology and aerospace initiatives across Europe. She is currently the CEO of StratXpace and director at New Sky, where she advises companies on corporate strategy, innovation, and the development of critical space infrastructure. Throughout her career, she has held major leadership positions, including managing director of space at Indra, CEO of Deimos Satellite Systems and Corporate Strategy and Development Director at the Deimos Group. Her expertise spans major international programs such as Copernicus and Galileo satellite constellations and small satellite missions for both institutional and private sector clients. She is also actively involved in initiatives promoting women in leadership and encouraging girls to pursue STEM careers. So we have three amazing ladies today, and I would like to open the discussion with a provocative question, right? If you can say in one sentence, what will define the space industry in 2035?
Go. Okay. Short sentence. I hope we can be proud of having a mature economic sector. And when I mean mature, I mean a sector which is not truly dependent on institutional budgets, but that is really a sector in which we can provide a clear solution and services for the citizens. So it's a sector that works by itself.
Good. Very long sentence, but it's still a sentence.
Well, I think 2035 is really around the corner, so it's 5 years in, 10 years in space-time is very short. So I think that in 5 to 10 years' time, what will define space is what is defining it today, and that is defense.
Mm-hmm. And Verónica?
Okay, I think because every one of us has, 2 years, 1 month, so I had the advantage to hear my previous panelist, and it's going to be a little bit challenge. For me, we are almost there because the elements, they are evolving nowadays. I think in 10 years from now, we can have the scenario where I open my mobile, I call a number, and I say, by tomorrow, I want to send a pair of shoes up to space. So it means that spaceport, they are closer, launch, they are affordable, I can pay with my salary, and it's definitely something that is democratized. Like nowadays, we go up to London quickly, buying a ticket on the internet, that's easy. So for me, this is the future in 10 years from now.
That will be really amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start with a set of individual questions, also to frame a bit the discussion. No? And I'm going to start with Elena, if I may. Elena, you have been working at the European Space Agency, also you are in the board of Leonardo. So where do you see the biggest challenges for the space sector today, from your point of view? And also linking that question to a second question that is related to something that Raquel mentioned, that given that you are also the professor of practice that is leading this area at IE University, linking, you could link those challenges to also the capabilities that you think that will define strategic leadership in space over the next decade. And Raquel mentioned some things related to STEM, to digital skills, big data skills, but if you could elaborate a bit more on that and expand maybe that list.
Sure. Well, let's start with, if you want, with a challenge. And I was, let me make one step back. I was really amazed and fascinated by the presentation you got about artificial intelligence. I think it was stunning, and the numbers were stunning. And you can really make a parallel between artificial intelligence, which is becoming more and more a strategic asset, and space. Space is a strategic asset. But if you listen to what the professor before us told you, you were talking about a private sector, which is investing hundreds of billions. Well, space is very much the same. It's investing hundreds of billions every year, but it's differently than the perception that I think most of you have, is still and remains essentially an institutional sector. 95% of the investment in space are done by the public sector. And of this 95%, since 2022, and it continues to grow, so we can expect that this will go on for another few years, more than half of this 95% and growing comes from defense. So once again, who is really investing in space, and therefore who is deciding what is happening in space? Defense, more and more. And they will decide the technology, and they will decide the programs. So if I think what is really the challenge in the next 5 to 10 years, the real challenge will be to define the rules of engagement for using space in militarized or security area. This is really fundamental. We need to understand how to use actively space, not only in terms of using it relay satellites, but if we really start to use space asset to proactively conduct operation, military operation, we need to understand how we use AI within space, also for kinetic operation and not only cyber operation. We need to understand and create common and global rules for the engagement in defense in space. We have to be very careful because space is also a very particular, how can I say it, dimension, really, where you have to be very careful not to distract things in space, because this will create this chain effect in which will basically distract the whole orbits and the sector. I think we might talk about debris later. So rules of engagement for defense, for me, are the big challenge. And now if we talk capabilities, I think I have a little bit of a different angle, and I think you are immediately relating to this. If I ask you what is the market driver at the moment for space, including triggered by defense and by the defense investment, is mega constellations. So mega constellations are the market drivers at the moment. You know, the Starlink, the Starshield, the Iris Square, the Huawong, the Thousand Sails. These are all mega constellations. Now, and this trend, this market drive, will continue again for another probably 5 years, at least 5 years, maybe more, maybe 10 years. We will continue to need and build this mega constellation in low Earth orbit. Now, to build a mega constellation in low Earth orbit, what do you absolutely need? What is the most strategic capability? Launchers. You need to be able to launch an awful lot of satellites. I mean, a mega constellation is thousands, 10,000s of satellites in a very short time, and to replace them, because they are in low Earth orbit, so they decay very quickly. So you have to build big launchers, and what we call the cadence. So how much time you launch per year has to be very, very high. So this is a strategic asset and a capability that, for instance, at the moment is only in the hand of SpaceX. And this is something that we need to build. I hope I wasn't too long.
No, it's perfect.
Thanks.
No, and I would like to link on what you said, that you mentioned 95% of the investment is coming from public institutions, right? But that doesn't mean that the private sector doesn't play a role, no? But because then the delivery of products and services and implementation of all the things that are needed is partially developed, as you might know, by the private sector, no? And I would like to link that to a question for Inmaculada, no? Because you have been working across large aerospace corporations, but also we have promoted entrepreneurial ventures. And I would like to know, from your point of view, what are the biggest opportunities and also bottlenecks today for space startups trying to scale and generate sustainable business models in Europe?
Yeah, well, I will link with what Elena was saying. I agree with her that probably in the coming 5 to 10 years, the main driver will come from the defense sector. But I also think that thinking in the long term, more than the 2030, 35 you mentioned at the beginning, we should be able to support a sector that does not so dependent on the institutional budgets. It's true. Now more than 95% of the projects that the company develops are institutional projects, but in the long term that should be changed. I mean, I think the situation we are facing right now probably is something similar at the situation for example, the aviation sector has in just before the Second World War. It's true that the Second World War implied a huge growth of the aviation sector, but one that finished, and I hope this uncertainty we have currently in the geopolitical picture will finish one day or another. The aviation sector remain, and then it grows from then, starting in the 50s, the 60s, and now the situation we have right now. I hope, and my provision is that, my forecast is that probably something similar happens. So most of the entrepreneurs, most of the smaller companies starting right now should think also in that long term. It's true that the short term is what it is, and for that, thinking in that, I think one of the major problems we have, this is very specific to probably to Europe, is the matter of the investments. Still, space is a sector in which you need a huge investment to start. It's not just for some activities more related with application. It's true that you can do it in a garage with your computer, but for most of the activities, if you are talking about infrastructure, if you are talking about products, component systems, subsystem of satellites, you need infrastructure, you need money in the end. Still in Europe, it's quite difficult to obtain that money. So I think this is one of the biggest problem that most of the companies are starting. We have some activities, but for example, if I give you an example of a company that just win an award from the ESA program for entrepreneurs, the ESA program gives them 60,000 euros, and just the first batch of activities to arise the technology to TRL like 6, 7, something like that, implies 300 euros. So there is a gap, a huge gap. I mean, it's like multiplying by 5 the gap between the money you get from ESA and the money in the end. You need to just mature the technology, just a bit, no a very commercial technology, but just to arrive. So that's one of the major problems. And also, I agree with Elena, the big bottleneck right now, and in the coming year, it's going to be the access to space. Access to space is very complex, it's very expensive, and the opportunities are very, very reduced. We need additional launchers. That was something that also Raquel were mentioning at the beginning of the session of today. We need more launchers. We need more places from which we are able to launch. Unfortunately, Raquel said Ariane last year launched 4 times. That was the only launcher, the only European launcher launched last year. Spaces launched nearly something about 170 launchers last year. So from 4 to 170, there is a big gap. And for this year, they are now projecting like more than 200 launchers. So that means 1 launcher every 2 days. So there is still a very big gap in the launchers, in the place where to launch here in Europe, and this is now another of the bottlenecks.
Wow. Very critical point you highlighted, no? That I like your example of aviation, no? How they started as a sector focused on defense, on public expenditure, but then little by little moved to commercial development. And I would like to link that also to a question for Verónica, no? Because you have been teaching in China, you have been teaching in Europe. Also, you have been supporting several space agencies, the European one, the Italian one, the Saudi one, the Colombian one. And Inmaculada just mentioned that we need big budgets, also we need more access to space, but it's also true that new countries are entering this broader sector of public institutions. No? So the question will be, how is this reshaping international collaboration? No? And also maybe also how is that reshaping also international competition?
Yeah, okay, so thank you very much for this question. It's quite interesting also to bridge with what Elena and Inmaculada told before. So from one side, nowadays we have a sort of tension. We have defense needs that they are pushing at demanding more advanced space-based system. And on the other side, we have also the interest of a new actor, a new startup that they would like to keep the chance to provide a new solution. And you know, when you have something that is business driven, then it needs to be sustainable. So defense can be a good anchor customer. And at the same time, sometimes if you are providing for some nation, some system, you may want to sell to someone else and you cannot for obvious reason. Of course, the world nowadays is a little bit with a sort of alliance. We have two big groups, and we have some country that they can play on both sides. So I would say that the benefit of the emerging country that mostly, like the Latin America, like the Middle East, they not all of them have a clear alliance choice. If they are US-oriented, China-oriented, Russia-oriented, or whatever. So it's an open market opportunity for the one that they are coming from the established space ecosystem to work with them. For instance, in Colombia, the space agency is not yet set. I mean, I supported the government to draft the national law to be presented to the Congress. And one of the first topics was now we need to enter the space ecosystem at global level because before it was too much costly. They told us that if we didn't have a budget of at least 150 million, we were not able even to say hello. So now we can work commercially driven. So basically we can find alliance to be at the beginning customer and then to develop the capability. So this is something very peculiar where actually a role like the AI university with an education offer play a role. Because, you know, space, it is something that you cannot be just a buyer. You need to know what you are buying. You need to have a capacity of people that they get value of spending this value for their society, for their citizen, and making value of them. So it's a complex matter. So at the end, there is collaboration, there is competition. I would say there is a sort of competition above. That's why it's very sensitive nowadays. With whom you are going to do space and how you are going to do space. So make successful or fatal your outcome.
No, very
Thank
interesting. And it's interesting that the three of you mentioned defense. No? And you started almost every intervention talking about defense, right? And also, Verónica, you say, okay, now we have new actors. We don't have a clear understanding of how the alliances are going to play out here. So do you think that space is going to become the next battlefield? And it's a question for the three of you.
If I may answer, the answer is no. The next battlefield is the next Ukraine, is the next Gaza, is the next Lebanon. The next battle is going to be on the earth. It's not in space. Now, space is a critical infrastructure. So it's very important. The regulation is very important. There will be huge investments. But the battlefield is here. It's not up there, in my view.
No, I agree. I mean, in the end, up to now, I have not listened any leader, in international leaders saying, I want to conquer the space. The space is just a medium. It's true that it's a medium that is now joining the battlefield, but it's another medium. It's not a conquer by itself, unless by the moment. I used to teach in some masters, and I used to start always putting a picture of the moon and a picture of Mars, and then ask the students, do you know where is this? And they usually say no. Well, and I say, well, this is the moon, this is Mars. Do you really want to be there, living there? I think it's not very sexy. It's not very fancy place to live. So I think I agree with Elena. The battle is here. The space is a medium which is now adding within the system.
Maybe we can add another element in a way that will be a little bit mediated between the position of Elena and Inmaculada, that the battle is on Earth, not in space. Of course, this is also my hope. Anyhow, we need to see that recently a number of conjunction, so basically means when some space assets they are close to a collision, they have been tremendously increasing. So I just read this morning that there was very close conjunction of an order of 1,000 kilometers, that in space in low Earth orbit is almost nothing, between a Russian cosmic satellite and ASI is a European Earth observation satellite. And they have been inducing a number of maneuvers to each other to avoid each other. So there was an intention for not capturing some picture, some target on Earth, distract the camera of the satellite or whatever. So it can become a battlefield, you know. Maybe it's even safer, because at least if the battle is in space, maybe human beings are not involved with directly. If it is on Earth, people died, unfortunately.
But if I may, I think that there is an increasing problem of congestion, but this is not. This is ideally something that everybody who does space, including defense, want to avoid, and it's something that could be really become a critical problem. And it is also the reason why, until today, we have not really done war in space, because if you destroy a satellite, you create so many debris that this will also destroy your own satellites. So the ASAT tests, the test anti-satellites have been stopped very quickly, but not because we are good or because we are scared. It's because you destroy the whole system. Now, what is changing, I don't know if you know, but around each big satellite, and in particular around each big military satellite, there are unfriendly satellites around, and they are watching it, and they are taking the data, and they're not destroying it because it would cause too many problems. But since very recently, there are systems to neutralize satellites, and therefore you leave them there, but they're like dead bodies. No, in this case, you will have a form of war in space, I think. But again, I'm convinced that unfortunately those who do wars are humans against each other, and it will be here, it won't be there.
My son is very fan of Star Wars, but I can say to him that Star Wars is still far, far away from us, but it's definitely going to play a role also in interworld situations here on Earth. And I would like to also connect the conversation to the previous presentation, that was related to data centers, AI, and so on. And when we think about space, sometimes we also connect to some specific symbols, like, for instance, the astronauts, and the role that they play in space. And being a bit provocative here, but do you think that with AI, with digitalization, and with data and algorithms, are machines and automatized systems going to fully replace human-led missions to space?
I can think, let me say one thing back. When you think AI, when you think automation, I mean, when do you need it? Essentially, you need it when you do something which is very boring, repetitive, a lot of data. You need it when it's very risky, because you don't want humans there. And you need it when it's when you're doing something which is technology-driven, not empathy-driven. So these are the characteristics of the systems that you use for AI. And this is the perfect description for space. So I think that we will want more and more automation and AI in human missions, because you don't, the least you can risk the life of humans and astronauts, the better it is. So the more automation can do, the better it is. And I don't want to ruin the poetry that we all have for human space and the astronaut there. But if you have a moment, what you should do is, it's very interesting, there is a European astronaut, Alexander Gerst. In 2014, he had this beautiful mission called Blue Dot, and he put online his OSTP. The OSTP is the onboard short-term plan. So it's basically his daily routine. Now, just put it down, and you'll see that his routine is defined every 5 minutes. So the slots are 5 minutes, and they tell you switch on this, do this, post-sleep, pre-sleep, go on the gym. There isn't much space for creativity. You shouldn't think that astronauts are there and they're thinking, you know what, I'm going to do this. So do we really need them? And how many do we need? And how much the machines can do? I think they will do more and more.
And the other day we have an astronaut here, and she said, I mean, it's not so exciting. I mean, you watch the movies and you feel that there is a lot of space for doing things, but and it's incredible, but it's not as exciting as you can imagine. But it's true that more automation will help not to reach farther lengths. And I would like to connect also to something that it was also mentioned, no? That you mentioned the business of mega constellations, also in the area of space. I mean, we should be careful, no? Because we can generate a lot of debris if we start doing things that are not adequate. But the reality is that debris is already playing a critical role, no? And it's an example of how regulation and governance could make a difference, right? But we are not there yet. No, there are some good examples, but there are some challenges as well. No, so how should the sector respond, no, to that common challenge, no, of having so many things around and having that debris?
Okay, so I take the floor.
Okay.
First of all, I would like to say that if we have many satellites in orbit, means that there is a lot of participation. Okay, so means that the satellites belong to someone. And when I have a new car, I take care of my new car because I don't want to scratch and whatever. So more people we have with their toy in orbit, more people take care of their satellite. So there will be definitely a better conscious behavior in space, I would say. So there is one side that is the self-regulation. On the other side, particularly recently with the increasing of the number of satellites in the low Earth orbit, I would say between the 400 up to 700, you know, it's the high congested. We have seen that directly the owner of the satellite, and the obvious one, the Chinese Sail Constellation, or the OneWeb, the former Kuiper as a name of Amazon, or the Starlink, they start to buy the services about space situational awareness, to have continuously monitoring. Till 5 years ago, everyone was claiming, the states needs to do the police of the orbit, so there should come investment from the private sector or whatever. Why? Because this new multi-satellite constellation, they are revenue driven. So if I buy Starlink and I use Starlink for getting internet home, and I lost the signal, I don't have broadband, I will start to say, okay, I'm not going to pay, I quit my contract. So it's immediately tangible incentive to do the best to serve your customer. And now it's impressive. There are so many new space situational awareness service providers that they have ground-based, space-based detector, where they provide a full comprehensive catalog. You get the data, you get the conjunction alarm when you have to move your satellite. Of course, moving a satellite is costly for the owner because reduce the lifetime of the satellite, so reduce revenue. But it's even better to lose the satellite and not having the revenue. So I think particularly now there is a spontaneous dynamic to take care of their asset in orbit. Of course, the story is completely different if we are looking for removing rocket bodies, upper stage, that maybe they are there and they are an hazard because there is a lot of propellant on board, so if they explode, if they collide with someone, sometimes they are almost defunct, so you cannot even control. This is really a matter. For doing the active debris removal, you need the consent of the owner of the satellite, of the asset you would like to remove. So to whom are you going to ask consent? It's a matter of having in place a policy that establish the relationship for the disposal phase, for instance. Pretty sure we are getting there, but the question is on the floor.
Can I ask you one thing?
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
sorry.
No,
go ahead.
Okay. I agree with Veronica, but it's true that today the situation is kind of, in some cases, it's in the far west, in the 18th, or sorry, in the 19th century, 18th century, yes, 19th century. I agree that the regulation is needed, but it's not only a matter of regulation, because it's quite difficult to impose those regulations to all the countries. I mean, because the difference here is that all the countries, all the companies are sharing a common space, which is the space, a common area, which is the space. There is no way to forbid a company to go to the space. If they find a place, they find a rocket to launch, you can do it today. I mean, today is quite easy for just universities, you spend like 500,000 euros and you are able to launch a satellite. A satellite that probably is this size, it's just a cube, but that can crash with a very, very expensive satellite of several thousand million euros. So something of 500,000 to crashing against something of several thousand million euros. And in the end, that could happen, and it's quite difficult. So I think still there are regulations, but also there should be not only regulation, but agreements between the countries to really avoid those type of situations, because it's not a matter that, okay, you enter my country, you respect my rules. All of us are in the same area, which does not belong to any country, so it's much more difficult to impose those rules.
No, actually, I was thinking the same. I was thinking exactly what you said. We need global regulation, because I was thinking, it's very nice the analogy you made about the cars, because it's very true. As soon as something is yours, you take care of it. But then if you think cars, you think that basically all over the world, the code of conduct, the rules for driving are state-driven.
Yes.
And they're state-driven because they want to make sure that it's not because you have a huge SUV that you can kill a biker. So there is also, to guarantee a certain balance of power, a certain correctness and fairness in the system. So I think we need both.
Yeah, I mean, just to add one element, because we are in university, one of the key points of the international space law, like a peculiarity, is that the 5 international treaties, they establish that in space there is no national sovereignty. So basically no one can say to another, hey, please go away.
Go away.
Of course, if you have a position, your behavior should not induce any damage to third parties, so you need to be conscious of what you do. But this is the main difference between airspace and space law, because in the spy satellite is fully legitimate. You can go and go around. You don't need a permission for going up. Instead, the spy airplane is illegitimate. If you are overflying a state without the approval authorization, the state has the duty to shoot you down immediately. So because it's an act of aggression, basically. So we can't, from one point of view, go back in freedom, I would say. Of course, I mean, having an understanding for not inducing preventing the exploitation of the space as a scenario of resource is a duty of everyone. And of course, if something is for free, I want to take as much I can. Why not?
So it's true that at the end of the day, probably and the solution will be a combination of self-regulation with global regulation, with other also mechanisms to prevent, to monitor, and to enforce that global regulation. But I have been said that we don't have time for questions from the public. I'm very sorry about that. The good news is that we will have at the end a cocktail, so you will have also the opportunity to ask questions. I'm very sorry because we are a university and that part is the most important part of this kind of conversation. Just to end, in 1-2 phrases, if you could say what is the single decision Europe should make today to play a leading role in space, what would you say?
It's very tough. I would say it doesn't matter if it is from an agency point of view or it is from a company point of view, but I do believe that really Europe needs to come with a big problem, big program to solve a big problem, you know, and leading the way, you know, because Europe, we have been always follower of the ISS led by the America, by the Russian, follower, and follower even from the commercial side. We are following the supplier of the commercial space station. Stop being follower. Let's lead something. I mean, let's be really creative with something big, and let's ask the other to come on board.
Inmaculada?
I think I come back to my first intervention. Probably it's a matter of, unfortunately, it's a matter of money. How much money we are able to put on top of the table, how much money we want to give, how we can come into the rise with the private finance institutions. It's a space still, unfortunately, is a matter of money. So if we want to lead, we have to put as much money as are putting our competitors or other countries, let's say, and then we should think, I agree with Verónica, in things which are not following the leader. If you want to be the leader, you cannot always follow the leader.
I have a little bit different angle because I think in Europe we have both the capacity in terms of workforce and also the know-how. So Europe altogether is very, very strong in space, and we have leadership. We have leadership in space science. We have leadership in Earth observation. We heard Raquel talking about Galileo. We know Copernicus is the best Earth observation system in the world. I think what Europe needs is to stop fragmentation. We need to do an integrated European space program. We cannot have Germany spending 35 billion for space to build their own constellation and other countries do the same, because then we overlap. We are not efficient. If we put together all our effort, if we stop fragmentation, then I think we are incredibly strong. Then we would be very, very, very strong.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have 3 clues to close the conversation. You have a lot of money. Consider that we need a lot of money and many investors to support the sector. Also, we need a lot of creativity and a lot of knowledge and talent also. So you are thinking about a career in the sector, consider that. And finally, we need to work together. We need integration, and we need to be aware that if we want to go alone, we'll not reach further. So thank you very much to the 3 of you. It has been very nice.
Thank you. Thank you.
And now for the following panel, I would like to invite to Catalina Tejero, that should be there. She's a very close friend, and she's also the Dean of the School of Humanities, right? That you might wonder, okay, why the School of Humanities is in the Tech Summit. And it's because we think that humanities play a real and important role in that process, no? Because technology, as it was mentioned at the beginning, without a very strong human and humanistic perspective is not the solution. So Catalina is over there, and she's coming.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure being here today with all of you. And I think we're going to be doing a bit change of gears and tackling a different topic in this tech evening. Shortly, we're going to be joined by Sophie Neuendorf, who is actually getting her headset. So you're going to have to give us a couple of minutes. But I wanted to first introduce the topic by basically saying that this panel, tonight's conversation is about art, but it's not about art. And what do I mean by this? The art market really gives us a fascinating lens through which to examine some of the biggest questions raised by technology today. And it's what happens with, what happens when subjective becomes data-driven, when trust moves from relationship to platforms, and when taste is increasingly shaped by algorithms. And I think we cannot have a better company to address these issues this evening, because we have just welcomed on the stage Sophie Neuendorf, who happens to be the Vice President of Artnet and also Artsy. For those of you who maybe would require a bit more of context on what those platforms are, probably there today, and we're just speaking about this just a second ago, I can say confidently that they're the two biggest players in the world right now if we speak about art and data. Artnet was founded in '89, and Sophie was just telling me that at that time, what Artnet was doing was was basically collecting the price of auction houses around the world, and actually that data was sent to Artnet via fax. I think some of you are too young to understand what a fax is, but that technology used to work back then. And since then, they've been, the platform has been transforming into very different shapes. They kept on collecting that data from auction houses, but they also became a news platform. They even had auctions themselves. It's been a great evolution. And I have to say that the family of Sophie has had a significant role there, because his father, Hans, has been the person who's led this project across several decades. And very recently, the platform has, a great, the platform was listed in the stock exchange. And very recently was bought a big stake by a fund, a US fund, and that same fund has also acquired the platform Artsy, which we can say was the other big player in the market. Artnet was more focused on the secondary market, and Artsy was very well known. Maybe some of you have been using this platform, maybe know it. Is a platform that is much focused on the primary market. So those two combined, I have to say that probably they are the people now that own the biggest data set in the art world. So as I say, I think we cannot have a better company tonight to really address this topic, which, as I say, that of course we're going to be speaking about art, but I think art is the perfect excuse to address something as complex as how technology can tackle something that is by nature apparently very subjective. So Sophie, thank you so much for being here today. It's really an honor having you, and I'm sure we're going to be able to tackle very interesting things for the audience.
Thank you for the amazing introduction. It's great to be here. It's a real pleasure. Thank you.
So I'm going to start with the first question, and it's, the art market is global and is sophisticated and valuable. I think we all agree on that, but it's also subjective. And I think I've repeated this word many times, but I think it's very important for the conversation we're trying to address here today. It's subjective, it's opaque, and it's relationship-driven. So why do you think it's such a compelling case study for thinking about technology and data?
It's a very good question. I just want to give some context here. The art market has been valued at around $60 billion annually. And that has fluctuated, of course, because of the pandemic, because of the Iran war, other reasons, but it's remained around that size, and that's UBS report data, which mainly they get the data from us. And so if you want to look at that in 2019, 5% of the market was happening online in terms of revenue. So that's a very small part of the entire pie. And then come 2020 and the COVID pandemic, the art market was forced to go online, and it increased that size to about 24%. So the online art market in terms of the entire pie is about 24%. You mentioned our data being sent out by fax. That was about 1989 when my father founded Artnet, and that was an interesting time. I don't really remember that time very well. I don't think any of you remember that time very well. But we've since evolved a lot. And when we started putting that data online, in fact, the then CEO of Sotheby's came to our office with a couple of friendly lawyers and said that we immediately have to desist, that it's not legal to collect art market data from auction houses and put it online. And thankfully, we won that disagreement and ended up being partners. And Sotheby's was actually the first partner to use Artnet data and actually endorse it and advertise it towards their collectors. And so this is how really our data project started. And to give some context, the data is we now have about 19 million data points online about global art market sales, any artists that have gone through the auction system. So it's become a really interesting project.
So how do you think the market has changed? What has been the impact when information that was once scarce, and when I speak about information, I speak about prices, I speak about provenance, I speak about auction results, reputation. What happens when all that information becomes searchable, comparable, and data-driven?
Well, interesting thing has happened. First of all, the art market has developed into a viable alternative asset class. And there's an example that I like to use when I actually lecture here, which I love to do, is that a couple years ago, shortly after the pandemic, a businessman in France decided it would be a fantastic idea to sell the Mona Lisa to reduce France's national debt. And then, you start thinking about how can you value an artwork like the Mona Lisa? Like, how do you put an actual price on an artwork like that? What is the difference between the cultural value and the financial value? And then they went through all sorts of scenarios and then settled on the insurance value, which is obviously derived from Artnet data. And I think they came to a sum that was around 500 million. In the end, obviously, as we all know, they didn't sell it because they felt that the revenue gained from tourists visiting the Louvre in the country was greater. But I think that's a really great case study to see the intersection. This is why the art market is so interesting in terms of data and technology, is because it really sits at the intersection of what culture means. Like, can you put a value on something invaluable? That intersection and that tension is really what makes the market right now.
When we speak about the art market, I think we always speak in a way about trust. And I think this is something we frame at the beginning of the conversation. It's a market that is very much relationship driven. So what role does technology play in, when trust, usually comes from relationships, expertise, reputation? What happens now when there is kind of a digital market where the trust is coming not from these relationships, but from platforms, from data, from analysis? Do you feel what is gained and what is lost in that shift?
Let's start with what is gained. I feel like the art market in Artnet and Artsy in providing collectors, especially first-time emerging collectors who might not be familiar with the mechanics, with the tools and the data to ground their decision-making, that has engendered a lot of trust and confidence in the decision-making and then purchasing process. And I think that has really then benefited the broader cultural ecosystem, because the more people enter the market, whether it's for buying for passion or primarily for investment purposes, the more money goes into the market, which ends up benefiting ultimately the artist and the general cultural ecosystem. So I think really what data has done and digitalization has brought so much trust and transparency to a formerly opaque market that it's really broadened it. There's a much greater interest now in art and culture, I find, especially when it comes to those high-value, multi-million-dollar artworks that go through the auction system, and I think that's been really fundamental. On the downside, obviously, if you're using a lot of technology and data and artificial intelligence to discover art and to value art, then the risk is obviously that there's first an erosion of taste because you've relied too much on artificial intelligence and what it's surfacing for you. And on the other hand, obviously it can become too much of a financial product. So then if you're going into it with the idea of buying art as an investment solely for that purpose, then the fear is that maybe you're not going to gain the upside that you want. you know. And so using data and technology only for that purpose, I think, is then the downside, basically, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And I would now like to tackle the idea of accessibility, visibility. I mean, I think something that we can all agree upon is that before, how could you access information about an artist or these kind of works? You had to live in a specific city where there was maybe an auction house, there was a gallery. Of course, I think we can all agree that technology has completely transformed this. Now anyone can, just by scrolling on their phones, they can access information on Instagram. Now most auction houses and galleries, they put up the works they're selling. Not that often they put the prices, but you can get a lot of information there. So I believe there's definitely been a great transformation on how art is discovered. However, are algorithms becoming, in some kind of way, the new curators, the new digital curators? And what do you how does, do they expand taste or they actually narrow it? Are we more free or less free to explore that art market?
It's a very interesting problem and a very interesting question. On the positive side, at least we have found that artificial intelligence and the associated algorithms have enabled our customers and our collectors to discover artworks that they've maybe previously never thought of. As you said, you could be clicking through the website and then get surfaced an artwork by a female artist from India or from China. You could look at a gallery in Hong Kong because you're getting surfaced this through the algorithm. However, the danger is that an algorithm, unless it's it's programmed to act differently, is kind of a self-reinforcing feedback loop. So the more people search for one system or one artwork, one genre, one category, the more it will surface that because it's the most popular. So then those artists that need the recognition, that are new to the market, they may not be surfaced at all. And it might leave out those artists that generally don't get a lot of recognition. I'm talking about female artists and other artists such as artists of color or artists that are too young, artists that are from areas of the world that don't generally get a lot of spotlight. These may not be surfaced as much as others that are generally searched for, and that's of course difficult. In terms of taste, yes, if we're really relying on data and auction results and the financialization of the market as an arbiter of taste, then that's a problem. Because generally, artists are representative of the zeitgeist, and they should be judged in terms of culture, in terms of what's happening globally, in terms of our emotions, and it should be more subjective than that, but grounded in the data. But if you're only relying on the data and the algorithm, then that might be a greater issue that we have to tackle.
I'm going to go back to something that I would like to get a bit deeper into, and it's price. And I have to admit that I know a bit the answer, but I'm not sure that the public is so familiar with this, and I think there is a very interesting reflection there. What has been the impact on the art market to have a bit more of transparency in the prices?
So I want to say first, for those who aren't too initiated with the art world, half of it is transparent, which is those artworks, the secondary market that you mentioned. Those are artworks that have gone through the auction system, and these prices are public, and these are the prices we harness and we harvest, and we have them on Artnet. And the other half is the primary market, which Artsy, our sister company, also has some of that data, but not all of it, and you can't trust it because it's not verifiable. So an art dealer, for example, can add whichever price he wants to his gallery roster, or he can tell a reporter, I sold my artwork for 10 million, and then he'll tell the IRS that it was in fact for 1 million, and he'll tell, I don't know, somebody else a completely different price, and there's no way to verify that. So that's the problem with the primary market pricing. It's a real issue, as you were saying.
And do you feel that platforms like Artnet, do you feel that a certain transparency, particularly, I mean, as you said, I think that the biggest value that was brought forward by Artnet was actually to make public across the world what was the closing bids in auction houses for certain artists. That transparency has led to higher or lower prices?
Absolutely has led to higher prices.
Which I think is
100% has led to higher prices. It's very interesting that you mentioned that, but if I look back on the auction results, especially in the secondary market blue chip sector, by which I mean your Warhols, your Basquiat, your Richter, your Picassos, which I'm sure everybody knows in the audience. I mean, most people are interested in the multi-million-dollar sales. I mean, it's just what garners the most attention. And I think because people inherently, collectors, like to show what they have, this then leads to more sales. And definitely the transparency and the access to the data that we provide has led to a sort of confidence in the resale value and the investment case that really has brought forth these insane prices that we're seeing today.
Anyway, I thought that was something interesting to mention.
Yeah, so if you do want to invest, there is potential for upside. Just depends on the artist you invest in.
Excellent. So I'm going to go into a bit of a deeper question, and it's data can measure price, can measure demand, can measure liquidity, can measure attention, but how do we really distinguish between market value and cultural significance, which might not be things that are naturally aligned?
I agree. I feel that there's often prices attached to artworks or value, financial value attached to certain artists that I feel are too high, or artists or artworks that are overrated. And then there's often many artists that have been overlooked because either they don't have the possibility of great gallery representation, they don't have the possibility of building the market through placement with important collectors or institutional exhibitions or all of the other soft indicators that make up the entire value of the price then. So there is definitely a case to be made for some artists being undervalued and some artists to be overvalued. And there's definitely a difference to be made between the financial value and the cultural value. If you think about the Mona Lisa that I mentioned in the beginning of our conversation, why did France not sell that? You know, obviously there's a financial value, but I think there's a great attachment to certain artworks that have just such a huge historical and cultural significance for any country and a nationality and also an identity. There's a lot of politics going into that, soft politics, into what artists mean for a nation, for the culture, for the zeitgeist. When you look back on a country, or if you want to try to understand history, what do you look at? You know, you don't look at their politics at the time. Maybe you do a little bit, but what you look at is the archaeology. You look at the design. You look at the artists. You look at what these artists were creating, and that informs you about a nation at that time. So this is hugely important, and I don't think you can necessarily put a price on that. And not all artists get to be in that spectrum. I think there's several artists out there, and I know of some, and I don't want to mention it here because that would be impolite, that have definitely massively appreciated in value in a very quick time, maybe I'm talking a year or two, and then just crashed. And this is, you know, I feel like a slow growth with an artist with a real focus on the creativity and what they're trying to express is much more important than forcing an artist to create work at a fast pace so that you can make the bottom lines as a gallery, or because the artist, I don't think the artist, there's hardly ever a moment, I think, where an artist does it just for the money. An artist is inherently somebody who's very creative. So I feel like often they're attached to a gallery who is trying to reach a bottom line, and they're seeing momentum, and they're pushing this artist to create more, and then the prices explode, and then they crash. And so that definitely happens a lot. And then the danger is that this artist doesn't enter into what's known as the art historical canon, as in not important in another 100 years. So it's a real problem. It's a very difficult balance to keep.
So linking this idea of cultural significance, and I think nowadays that we're totally immersed and bombed by, platforms, AI, and we're all wondering what kind of eruption is going to have technology in our lives. What do you think will remain essentially human in the way we experience, we enjoy, and we produce art? What remains essentially human in all this experience, if there is any room for that?
I always feel that the discovery using artificial intelligence, using platforms like Artnet and Artsy, using data parameters can happen online. I think that transaction can happen online. I think that's very efficient. It's much more cost effective than, say, buying at Sotheby's or in a gallery, because there's less overhead involved, so the prices are lower. But I do feel that the in-person experience of an artwork is absolutely essential, and that's an essentially human element. Creating art, I feel like, is an essentially human element. And there's a huge argument at the moment in the art industry that is an artwork that is created solely using artificial intelligence, is that really art? Can an AI persona be an artist? Or can an artist only be human and have what's known as human emotions? So there's this, even go down to the legal aspects, like, is there copyright attached to an artwork that is created by AI? Like, is it even classified as art? And at the moment, it's not, because a certain amount of the artwork has to be created by a human for it to be legally classified as an artwork. You know, and so I think these are all discussions around artificial intelligence in terms of creativity that we still have to have. But essentially, at the moment, I think the creation process and the in-person experience is something that is essentially human, and is something that we're going to be looking back on and thinking, what did people at this moment in time, what were they struggling with? What was happening in the world now? If we're looking back in 100 years' time, will we be looking at art created by artificial intelligence and saying that was human?
Well, thank you so much, Sophie. I think with this last more philosophical reflection, we're going to close this conversation. Definitely art is shaped by technology, and technology shapes art. I think the bigger question is, out there, and where really the boundaries between, what technology can achieve and how far technology can go, whether just human imagination is some kind of like algorithmic projection that can be predicted by a very sophisticated machine. Probably only time will tell whether that's the case. Probably the more we can consider that we're just the product of some very complex algorithm, the more space technology is going to occupy in that conversation. But what I know for sure is that art is always going to remain a great space to train our minds, to train our creativity, and to pose the really hard questions, probably the interesting questions, the questions that will help us probably understand and navigate the future, and understand what we really want to do with it.
And define what is human and what is not.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Catalina.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thank
Great
you,
having you today, and thank you all for being here.